Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're continuing our Lore of Magic Spotlight. We're actually in a 2v2 today, so we're going to tackle a 2-for-1. We're taking a look at the Skaven's Lore of Plague and the Dark Elves' Lore of Darkness. So let's go ahead and briefly take a look at the army compositions here. We're in a nice 2v2 with myself and Sakarma against John Ton and one of their subscribers. If you guys haven't checked out John Ton and Sakarma's channel, Total Brohammer, definitely go check it out. They are both very good players. You guys can get some good insights from them. So I'll leave a link down to their channel in the description below. In terms of the army here, we've got Lord Skrolk leading the way. He's got the Lore of Plague, which is a very, very strong lore, probably the stronger of the two Skaven lores, in my opinion. He's got Pestilent Breath and Vermintide for the two spells. So Pestilent Breath is a nice breath spell, does a decent amount of magic damage, very good against low armor targets. And of course, Vermintide summons a unit of clan rats. We've also got his two items, Rod of Corruption and Liber Bubonicus. We've backed him up with an Assassin. We've got Kolek and a Shadow Sorcerer here. The rest of the infantry composition, we've got a couple of clan rats, a mix of some Chaos Marauders and Chaos Warriors. The Chaos Warriors look like they've all got great weapons. We've got a couple of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, clan rat spears out to the flanks with two Skaven Slave Slingers up front, 4 Gutter Runners out to the wings, some Poison Warhounds, and just all the goodies here. In terms of our opponent's army, we've got an alliance of elves, so dark elves and wood elves teaming up today. We've got Malekith here on a cold one, so he's going to be our dark caster today, Lore of Darkness. He's carrying Power of Darkness, which is a direct damage spell. It causes damage to friendly units, however, it gives you more winds of magic. So the idea is you cast this on another unit, preferably a very cheap unit like these Dread Spears, for example, and it'll give you some extra winds of magic. Let's take a look at what else he's brought here. Soul Stealer is going to be the other main spell here, as well as Word of Pain. Word of Pain is a really nice debuff. Minus 44 melee attack is huge, and Soul Stealer is a direct damage area of effect. Similar to Final Transmutation, I would say, in terms of damage output. It's good against single characters, but will still do damage to all units. Does quite a bit of damage, and more importantly, heals the caster that's casting it. So the idea here is that Malekith can get self-healing by using this the Soul Stealer, and makes him much tankier. He's also got the Gaze of Malice and Destroyer, which is a plus 45 ability recharge in that area of effect. Very, very useful item. For the Elfin Alliance here, we've got Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. This unit of Glade Riders here took an absolute beating from my 3 Warp Lightning Cannons, and now we're turning our attention to these Wild Riders here. We've also got some Hawk Riders, front line of Dryads, plenty of Glade Guards with Starfire Shafts, some War Dancers with Azrai Spear, a Glade Lord, and a Shadow Spell Singer. We've got some Hargoneth Executioners, 3 of them, Blackheart of Nagron, and a Witch Elf in the rear, 3 Dread Spears, a couple of Bolt Throwers. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and kick the battle into full gear without much further ado, and we'll watch as these Wild Riders just get absolutely blasted by the laser batteries up on the hill there. It's quite the force arrayed up on the hill. You can see there's the batteries of artillery firing away, Kolek, the Hell Cannons, all sorts of nasty stuff. So the sheer volume of fire here from all this artillery is going to be incredibly painful. We're getting the Gutter Runners out to the flanks to finish off these Tattered Glade Riders here. And now that we've done a ton of damage to those Wild Riders as well, we're going to be switching the targeting onto these Hawk Riders here. The Dark Elves are going to be pushing up on this side, and the Wood Elves pushing up on this side. So since we have kind of this functional group, we're going to push them up and around and kind of take this position here with the rock, and then use the rest of the rock to kind of form up a main line this way. So yeah, you can see those Hawk Riders, the overwhelming fire from those batteries of Warp Lightning Cannons, just doing a ton of damage. Likewise, these Gutter Runners are also going to do a ton of damage. Hawk Riders are a pretty strong unit in terms of their shooting. They also have armor piercing and melee, but the only 15 armor means they're very, very squishy to missile fire. We've got a little bit of a melee engagement underway. The Skaven Slaves being routed off very quickly, unsurprisingly, by the Dryads here. And then the Clan Rat's going to get in, shields out, hold the line here with some Aspiring Champions to give them some encourage, and to also deal some nice splash damage here to some of these Dryads. Likewise, Warriors of Chaos moving up and around the flanks. We're getting a nice little surround here with the Skaven forces over on this side, able to isolate a lot of the Wood Elf units in the back line. Meanwhile, in the front line here, you can see Malekith We're targeting him with the Warp Lightning Cannon, so he's starting to take a lot of damage here. He needs to pop that Soul Stealer in order to heal himself as soon as possible. Frontline engagement is getting underway here, though. Unfortunately, these Scud Runners are a little bit caught up here. We're going to try and path them through. Hargoneth Executioners will do a lot of damage to these Chaos Warriors. Great Weapons. Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons will be able to do a little bit back, but a little bit of friendly fire here as the targeting on Malekith does mean that these Warriors with Great Weapons are going to take some friendly fire here. But yeah, definitely just providing a little bit of an anvil for the magic missile damage. And here comes a nice Penumbral Pendulum right down the line, scything through quite a few of our units there. So very good stuff. I'm not sure if that was whose side exactly that was on, but it did damage to both sides, so it's hard to say. I guess it was probably, yeah, I'm not really sure. Skrulk's just summoning up extra clan rats here. You can see so far, I don't think we've actually summoned maybe just the first one now, but yeah, getting in here also using that nice Rod of Corruption to just drain these Hargoneth Executioners off the battlefield. Likewise, we've been using that Plague Breath to pretty good effect so far. The Skrulk's up to only 15 kills, but yeah, Malekith is having a really hard time here fighting up against Kolek Sun Eater. Haven't caught if he has used that Soul Stealer quite yet, but he definitely wants to, especially in a fight against Kolek. Malekith has pretty good combat stats. He'll be able to stand here and fight for a while, but that Soul Stealer in particular will give him the self-healing to really pull through in that engagement. Meanwhile, we're pushing through the back line very aggressively here. You can see this unit of clan rats here has been summoned, so pulling up extra bodies here to try and tie down a lot of the Wood Elf ranged units in the back line. That Glady's taking some major heat from the Warp Lightning Cannon batteries, and a Skrulk getting in here with his nice little Plague Flail, giving the business to these guys. Plague Breath there is a clean miss. Didn't catch any of those Glade Guards, unfortunately. Would have been very powerful if I had, but yeah, we're just going to be pushing through there. Looks like Melkoth's misfying the Azimuth, just trying to keep Skrulk slowed. That the Contaminate effect that he carries is very, very strong. Meanwhile, over on the other side of the battlefield, I'm not sure what happened to Malekith, buddy. Oh, looks like here he is, still alive, trying to regenerate some Winds of Magic here. But yeah, at this point, it's looking pretty well in favor for myself and Sakarma. One of the Warp Lightning Cannon batteries was shut down, but the Warlock Engineer, who I've got, is fighting in here with his Warp Stone armor, going to be draining all the guys in this pocket. We'll take a look at the Lore of Ruin that this guy carries on another day. I've got a replay with the Grayseer Lore of Ruin that I'm going to be showing to you guys. But I wanted to get this one out because, of course, I know you guys love your 2v2s, and this was a very fun and thematic 2v2. With Vermin tied out, you guys, you know, the Chaos Warriors and Skaven kind of work together a little bit there, and as much as the forces of Chaos can work together, I'd imagine that the Skaven and Chaos, sometimes their goals may align and they may work together. Similarly to the Dark Elves and the Wood Elves, I know there's no love lost there, but I like to think that it's lore friendly. Whether or not it actually is another matter entirely, but Warp Lightning Cannon is still online here. These Hawk Riders are going to try and come shut him down here, but at this point, Malekith is just taking so much damage, getting inundated by Poison Hounds. And yeah, at this point, it's going to be GG. Over on the far side, Skrulk is pushing off the last of the Wood Elf forces, and that's it. So very well played to Jonton Sakarma, and I apologize, I don't remember the other guy's name here. Count Hustle. There we are. Very well played to everyone involved. Super fun battle, so let's just briefly take a look at the breakdown here, and we'll go talk in more detail about the Lore of Darkness and the Lore of Plague. So, yeah, for myself, 37 kills on Skrulk. Pretty decent. He did take a lot of damage, but also summoned up quite a few clan rats there, helped inundate the back line of Count Hustle. The Gutter Runners, likewise, did some really nice work, and the Warp Lightning Cannon, this one in particular, racking up 50 kills and 3 XP chevrons. Very, very strong. For Sakarma, his Chaos Warriors did relatively well across the board. Hell Cannons also did pretty decent. 100 kills on those Warhounds is pretty solid, considering we're fighting elves. And yeah, just all around pretty decent. From Jonton here, 52 kills on Malekith, so he's definitely dropping those Gaze of Malice very effectively. And the Hargoneth Executioners, 122 and 84, did very well. Blackguard underperformed a little bit. Dread Spears, 56 is not too bad at all. But the Witch Elves also were kept in a more defensive position, just protecting the Bolt Throwers, which did all right. But honestly, with the Dark Elves, because you can take AP missiles without taking the Bolt Throwers, I don't think it's really necessary. For Count Hustle, Some of his Dryads did pretty decently, cutting through Skaven infantry, but the War Dancers just really got inundated in the back line by those Gutter Runners, and likewise his Cav and his Hawk Riders just took a blasting from the laser batteries there, so that was pretty rough. All said and done, though, very fun battle. So let's go ahead and just take a look now at, we'll start with Lore of Plague here for the Skaven. So Skrulk himself is probably one of the best characters for the Skaven. Of course, he's got Lore of Plague and the Plague Priest, who you guys will no doubt see plenty of with his dreaded Plague Furnace. We'll take a look at that in just a minute here. But for Skrulk, we'll look at the spells in general. So Plague Rash is the lore attribute here. Not the best lore attribute in the world, but minus 12% speed, minus 9% vigor map-wide to all enemies every time you cast a spell. He's alright. If you can debuff your opponent's vigor early on in the battle, it can be helpful, but in the late game, that's not really going to help too much. The minus 12% speed is okay, but it's not the best thing in the world. I typically actually will cut this, depending on the matchup. But in terms of the spells themselves, Pestilent Breath we saw, it's a very good breath spell. Bless with Filth essentially gives you an AoE poison effect, so it imbues poison to all units in an area of effect. A decent cheap spell, only 5 winds of magic, and it is, you know, it's always nice to have that poison effect, so definitely like that one. Wither is another great spell, gives a minus 30 armor in a large area of effect, and if you overcast it, we can go ahead and take a look here, it actually gives minus 60 armor, which is a pretty significant armor debuff. That's essentially an overcast Plague of Rest in an area of effect. Granted, it is relatively expensive at 16 winds of magic overcast, 10 winds of magic for the regular version, but overall, very useful spell to have. Vermintide we saw summons Clan Rats. Plague is an interesting one. Plague is a vortex spell, but it says, at least on the tooltip, it's a vortex spell, but it's really a stationary vortex. You can see from the kind of animation that's playing here, this rat effigy kind of gets summoned and just stays here, which means all units in that area of effect are going to take damage. In practice, it works more like a Pit of Shades or a Dwellers Below. It doesn't have the speed debuff of Dwellers Below, but it has that nice big area of effect magic damage. Doesn't do the most damage, but if you overcast it, it is actually pretty scary. You won't see it brought too often, but it is a spell that you have an option of taking. Likewise, the Pestilent Birth will give you 2 Plague Monk summons, which Plague Monks are pretty powerful. It is relatively expensive at 12 winds of magic, but in the right situation against, you know, the right targets, Plague Monks can be very powerful, so good stuff. And yeah, that's it for the lore of Plague. The Plague Priest can take the Plague Furnace here, which I just briefly want to touch on as well. It has this Billowing Death ability, which is essentially like a Mortis Engine-like effect. It's an area of effect, direct damage drain, that's 40-meter radius all around the Plague Furnace. It's a very, very powerful ability, and it's the main reason why you'll see people occasionally spam the Plague Furnaces. It's worth noting, however, that the Grey Seer does not, the Screaming Bell does not have the same effect. It actually has a different effect that buffs all nearby Skaven, which is still very strong, but not direct damage. So it is also worth noting that the Grey Seer has access to a unique spell here. So he has Pestilent Breath, Bless with Filth, Wither, Vermintide, and Plague, but rather than the Plague Monk summon, he has the dreaded 13th spell, which the Grey Seer of Ruin also has. We'll take a look at that in practice in the other replay, but essentially it does an explosion and then summons a unit of Storm Vermin. It's a very, very strong spell. Like I said, we'll look at that on another day, but it is worth noting that the Grey Seer Lore of Plague can take that spell. So that's it for the Skaven. Now moving over to the Dark Elves, we'll take a look at the Lore of Darkness. So Malekith, Marathi has a few spells from the Lore of Darkness. She has the Power of Darkness, which gives you more winds of magic, and considering that Marathi already has a greater Arcane Conduit, it means that she can get a ton of winds of magic. She also has Soul Stealer for the direct damage and self-healing. So likewise, Malekith carries Soul Stealer and Power of Darkness. The other spells here, Chill Wind is a wind spell. It doesn't do much damage, but it does apply that Frostbite effect. It's okay against low armor targets, but mainly people use it for the Frostbite effect. I'm not the biggest fan of the world, especially if you're taking Malekith. I think it's more efficient to sink your magic into the self-healing. But Word of Pain is a nice debuff, relatively cheap as well. But again, personally, I like to sync, if I'm taking Malekith, I like to sync the magic into Soul Stealer. Blade Wind is a pretty cost-effective Vortex spell. It actually does a pretty decent amount of damage, and if you overcast it, I believe all Vortex spells, when you overcast them, are slower, and it lasts longer as well. Doombolt is an interesting one. It's a bombardment spell, but it essentially shoots a single missile from the sky that does a pretty good amount of damage to especially like a character or a single unit. It's very strong against single model entities. If you overcast, it does quite a bit of damage. I'm not the biggest fan of this spell. Again, if you're taking Malekith, I really think you want to go with the self-healing. It's very, very strong to have that, to be able to have, you know, that kind of safety net. That being said, if you take another Lord and then take a Sorceress Lore of Darkness, she's not really as important to heal. So I would in fact say you could probably cut Soul Stealer with her and go with some of the other spells. Power of Darkness is always a pick. You always want to have this to get additional Winds of Magic from your own units. And then Chill Wind might be useful. Word of Pain, you know, depending on the matchup, I may take these spells. You know, well, let's talk about it. So, Chill Wind, if you're fighting a faction like the Beastmen, for example, that's very fast, you need to be able to get away or catch them. That Frostbite can be very useful. Likewise, if you're fighting the Wood Elves, you're trying to chase down, you know, Way Watchers or Deepwood Scouts that are running away. That Chill Wind can be also very useful for that. Word of Pain, again, efficient debuff, can be useful in a multitude of situations, but particularly in a heroic fight, if it's a Lord-on-Lord engagement or a particular high-value unit you need to take off the battlefield. Blade Wind, I would definitely recommend taking against Horde factions, like the Skaven, or even the Vampires occasionally could be useful to have Vortexes against, just because it's going to be really good at clearing out masses of low-armor infantry. Doombolt is, I don't know, it's alright. I'm not the biggest fan of this, but it can snipe slow-moving characters pretty effectively. Someone like a Corpse Cart or you know, an infantry character is going to be relatively easily sniped by that Doombolt, so it can be a useful tool. I'm just not the biggest fan in the world. So, yeah, that's Lore of Plague and Lore of Darkness. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that replay there and this kind of analysis of the two lores. I'm going to be keeping it coming with more Lore of Magic spotlights. I've got Beast and what's the other generic one? Metal lined up. And we've also got the Lore of Ruin for the Skaven, and then we'll finish things off with the Lore of Little Wog and Lore of Nekara. So stay tuned for all that and more. Thank you all for your support and for watching, and we'll see you next time.